Welcome, Training Group Live. We have, well, for the video people, you already get to see a couple new faces. For the audio listeners, on deck, we have Scott Arnberg.
Evening, Joel.
Yeah, you got to talk. You can't flash gang signs. And a new face and voice of the podcast, Yuman Lee. Or Lynn, I'm
Hey,
so sorry.
Joel. No worries. Hey, Joel. Thanks for having me on board.
No, thank you for coming on. This is awesome.
Yeah, Joel, thank you. I know we've had this scheduled. This is kind of our standing monthly thing to give an update on Area 3 and what's going on with USPSA, what I can talk about officially. This month we're adding Yi Min. He was gracious enough to rearrange a schedule to join us. And we'll have to see who else we can get going forward as a way to kind of bridge the gap and get the word out there and try to communicate to both the people in Area 3 training group and hopefully all of USPSA.
Sounds awesome. And then we can get Eamon to come back on, and I can put out a feeler for questions, and I can interrogate him. That sounds like a really good future podcast too. If he's willing to be interrogated. We'll see how this goes. Maybe I'll get no, never put me through that nonsense again. So guys, what do we have to talk about? There was a meeting recently that I think is probably worth discussing.
Yep. Meeting. We had our first match last night as my local club started its club matches, and we had a highlight of hail and driving rain, but we persevered and finished. Excited to be shooting again, and then I've got some Area 3 updates.
Sounds awesome. Well, where do we want to start, Scott? We've got a lot. Actually, we do have a lot of stuff to talk about.
Well, I think we just let's go through the minutes. They're posted, and great job on the board as a whole, really getting these turned around and getting them out and trying to work as quickly as possible to communicate to the members with what's going on with the org.
I like it. Well, let's see. So I'm looking at I'm scrolling through it now. It looks like everyone is in attendance. And the first item that comes up, I'm like, oh, tell me more about this. Conflict of interest review. It says move to next regular meeting. What's the story there?
Yeah, that's an item that I added to the agenda. And this week, this month is when we approve the budget. And the budget is time sensitive. It has to be approved according to the bylaws by the 31st of March. And it ended up just taking the bulk of the meeting. The board of directors as a group is working very, very hard to make sure that we're making good financial and good budgetary decisions. I want to commend these people they spent over 5 hours on the Tuesday and another 2 hours plus on Friday to get this done so that we, one, met our deadline, and two, make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can as a group to come together and make the best decisions possible for the organization. And Yemen did a great job keeping us on task to a certain extent. I think it's a bit like herding cats occasionally. Sure. And really commend Donna. She put a ton of work into getting us ready for this discussion. You've got to give credit where credit is due.
I like it. Makes sense. Let's see. Steel Challenge. Doesn't look like anything too noteworthy there to discuss. 2024 Nationals planning.
Yep. So actually, for the Steel Challenge, Joel.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting things about Steel Challenge is that it's something that a USPSA owns entirely. It doesn't impact IPSC, and we know that there are clubs out there internationally that participate in Steel Challenge. So one of the growth opportunities that we've really been looking at is doing Steel Challenge affiliation overseas. There's definitely some interest in the IPSC regions to say, hey, we'd like to be able to run Steel Challenge within our own regions. How do we go about doing that? I mean, our current process right now is that we affiliate individual clubs. And we're just going through the process of figuring out, okay, if we were to affiliate a Steel Challenge region, so I'm just going to pick on Australia because, Gareth has been very helpful with the process. IPSC Australia, if we were to affiliate with them, then they would be our representative for Steel Challenge. They would do the club affiliation. And then what would that business relationship look like between USPSA and IPSC Australia? Would they pay an affiliation fee? Would they have to worry about activity fees? And any opportunity that we can look at to give members in countries outside the U.S. an opportunity to shoot. Especially within rimfire. We're really fortunate here in the U.S. that, if you name it, we can pretty much shoot it. And you've got some other countries that go, yeah, all we can shoot is airsoft. So particularly in Asia, there is a huge untapped resource out there to actually do an airsoft version of Steel Challenge. There's some folks out there that are doing some testing for us, using the sensors. I think, for those people that haven't seen various YouTube videos in Japan, they have these really, high speed sensors where, you're basically able to do airsoft inside a mall in like in a little room, and they just have the sensors that can just tell immediately that you've got a hit. So there's some interest in Steel Challenge, and I know that's something that we've looked at in the past before. But it's another opportunity for us to increase exposure for Steel Challenge overseas and potentially revenue source. So we do understand that this is a very fiscally constrained year. I'd like to key off of what Scott said. There was a lot of stuff that we looked at and being very disciplined and taking a look at where we could reduce our spending and live within our means. And at the same time, we're looking at potential opportunities to increase revenue that doesn't necessarily involve, hey, everybody's got to take a bite out of the sandwich and raise your member dues and so on and so forth.
Sure. No, it makes sense. Yeah, if there's more exposure and activity fees, affiliations, that's all. That would be awesome.
And just broadening, our footprint and our way of thinking, beyond just our borders in areas that are underserved and maybe in that specific shooting sport or discipline.
Sure. Oh, makes sense. What about 2024 nationals planning?
So one of the discussions about nationals planning right now, and Joel, if from what I've seen and certainly maybe what you've seen, is that we traditionally tend to do nationals on a year-by-year basis. We basically say, hey, here's the nationals at the end of September, October, and that gives members, a very small window of time to be able to plan for their travel schedules and whatnot. One thing that we did do beforehand is create a long-term contract with CMP. So one of the things we'd like to be able to look at is establish some sort of stability with the nationals, so that way members, whether they're trying to qualify for an IPSC World Shoot or they're just trying to plan around their vacation schedules, to be able to come out and say, hey, we've already got nationals figured out. These are the locations they're going to be at. If we could do things that are multi-year, then that provides a level of stability for, what our organization should be handling, which is nationals, and that getting that information out to the members says, okay, I can plan out for the next 2 or 3 years, hey, here's where I'm going to go. Here's the dates I need to ask for time off. So part of that discussion in 2024 nationals planning is trying to get ahead of the curve and put that information out there sooner rather than later. Than what we've traditionally done. And so contract negotiations are definitely a very interesting beast, and it takes a lot of work.
Sure. Do you think nationals should switch around from maybe even area of the country where it's in the Midwest for a couple years, that it's on the East Coast and it's on the West Coast or whatever? Or what are your thoughts on that?
So I think, from a nationals perspective, we do have to take into account, where the vast majority of competitors are. And for better or for worse, those numbers are primarily east of the Mississippi. But at the same time, it is a national organization, being able to say, hey, this nationals is in the West Coast, this nationals is in the East Coast, that's part of that long-term planning. The challenge is always, what ranges there are that are available as well. And so having, we know traditionally where we put some of our nationals, we've looked at a couple of new locations. So, for example, this year will be the first time we're going to the Cardinal Center in Marengo, Ohio, and I'm really looking forward to seeing, what they have available for us. You start looking at west of the Mississippi, the number of ranges that can really support a nationals and what we're looking at in our traditional format, that number starts to shrink quite a bit, especially when you consider that nationals, we really like to find a place to host a national that already has an existing USPSA infrastructure. So when you start, there are, I'm sure there are plenty of ranges out there. Scott, you mentioned South Dakota basically building that new complex down there. Something that is government funded. That's a great opportunity in terms of a one-stop location. And then, kind of have to take a step back and go, okay, well, if we want to have a nationals in a place that does not have an existing USPSA infrastructure, what is the capital expenditure required to essentially hold a nationals at that location? And if we're going to do the capital expenditures to help support a match at a brand new location, then then, it's from a fiscal spending perspective, we would probably want to say, hey, we're going to be here at least for 3 years so that you can get some return on your investment.
Sure. No, makes sense if they don't have props and stuff on hand.
Well, and it's not just props; it's the staffing component. It carries through. I'll take the sectional that I've run in Iowa for many years. All the staff, except from a few that travel, come within an easy drive away. So there's no hotel stay. There's not like that, and it really helps the bottom line of the match. And that's one of the biggest expenses for nationals is that many times the host club, why they may be able to host a level 2, they can't necessarily put on the staff for a level 3 or a nationals. Grand Island is another example. They have a club based out of their range, but they're growing, and the match director there does a great job. But it's still not the same, not what we need for Area 3. And why we're speaking about that, could still use a few more ROs. So if you're interested, contact me either through my USPSA email or just USPSA@ankinyatics.org. We could use a few more ROs. We've got a very, I think, attractive RO package.
And I'm definitely looking forward to coming out and helping you with that match.
Yeah.
Well, as long as we're talking about nationals, I can't help myself. I got to ask. I understand there's scheduling conflicts. How do you feel for the future nationals should be set out as far as time of the year? Because, all right, I got to be a little bit selfish. I mean, here we got snow here a week ago. Granted, it didn't stick around. So having like a May national somewhere, it's not a good proposition to actually be trained up. Whereas normally later in the year is better for most areas of the country. However, then I realize if you're going to have 3 or 4 national matches back to forth, that's wear and tear on the staff. I mean, it's tough then stacking those back to back or weekends on end. What are your thoughts for the future as far as what time of year national should be held in?
And I think that's I think mine's different.
It is a really challenging question, Joel. So if we consider nationals as the culmination of a shooting schedule year, then we're traditionally looking at sometime in September, October, November, right? The last area match I think is Area 8 at the end of August. So if you look at the 2 months of the year that would fall after most of the area matches are in place, that really provides some pretty significant time constraints. I mean, you're basically at the end of the summer, right? So you run into daylight issues. We do want to be able to try to get as many folks to participate in nationals as possible. And when the daylight starts to go away, there's only so many places you can go. Having a nationals early in the year, I know we've done that with classic nationals on Mother's Day and with Carry Optics and Assets here in June. It's a very fine balance in our range availabilities, the dates that they're available, and on top of that, trying to consider, hey, we really want this to come, for most members, I think that they would like to see nationals as something they build up to, and that includes all your various level 2 matches, your level 3 area matches, or any major matches beyond that. It's just always a challenge. And so when we start talking about the 2024 nationals planning, that's something where if we're able to get a more long-term focus on, hey, nationals are set for these 3 years, then that gives the members visibility and an understanding of, hey, I know that I can use the major matches in the year leading up to a nationals where it should be a culmination. It's a work in progress. So ideally, September, October is probably the best time. September, October leaves you 2 months, and depending on where you're at, there's only so many places that you can go to that would be available at that time.
Sure.
Yeman makes some great points. I can remember back when nationals was one time, right? You picked your division and you shot and you trained for it, and at the same time, if you look at Carry Optics nationals this year. I think the wait list is over 200 people with 450 some slots. I'm planning on showing up at the match. I'm not going to shoot it. I wouldn't feel right taking a slot away from a member. I'll show up, be there for the members meeting, and try to basically as an opportunity to talk and see nationals and be there. But it's hard. It's a balancing act. Every nationals you put on, there's a sunk cost, right? There's a basic cost that happens with every match, a minimum outlay, so to speak. And sure, by having fewer matches, you could, maybe not pay that as many times. But at what cost to our membership? We've got a lot of people that look forward to nationals. It's their thing of the year. If we could wave a magic wand and turn Carry Optics Nationals into 650 slots and not absolutely kill off our staff and balance everything else, I'd love to. But it's hard. It's hard.
Well, it's also a really good question of growth, right? So talking to some of the upper IPSC regions, their national matches is a one match where everybody shoots all their divisions. And you're also talking about these IPSC regions where, they don't have that many members. A good way to look at it is it's just the problem of growth, right? I mean, we do gather a large number of members. All those members are willing to shoot, and it's trying to find that balance of giving them the opportunity to be able to participate in nationals balanced with, the fiscal constraints that we have. I mean, 30,000 members right now, since Russia is not in IPSC right now, we are the largest IPSC region, and by quite a bit, at 38,000 members. And I think there's only eight IPSC regions, 8 or 9 IPSC regions that have more than 3,000 members. So it's a very interesting challenge that we have. It's the challenge of growth. We have a lot of people that want to shoot, and we want to be able to provide them the opportunity to go shoot at a nationals. So how do you balance that?
Yeah,
sure. Knowing the any business, regardless if you're up or down, every organization could always use more money. So it's an interesting proposition that if there's so many people waitlisted for Carry Optics Nationals, they want to get in. That's essentially people standing there wanting to pay you money, and we're like, sorry, I can't take your money. So solving that solution, or having a facility where we could hold a bigger match or house more people without, I suppose, so much expenditures on the match itself that would negate the extra income we had. I mean, potentially that would be a nice win, because nationals is what, $300 a person, something like that.
This year nationals is $335. It honestly becomes a math equation. I mean, Scott,
sure.
you've dealt with match management. Joel, I know you have as well. Mm-hmm. You're always trying to find that balance of
totally get it.
If I only have so many bays, I only have so much daylight, and I only have, I can only put so many people on a squad before things start to push. I mean, what's the number? Like, every person you add on a squad basically adds 5 minutes to your time.
Yeah. That's a great point. We've all been at the match where, the squads, for whatever reason, get a little bigger, get a little bigger, get a little bigger. And then all of a sudden, it's, you find yourself waiting and waiting and waiting. USPSA the sport itself is interesting, that we spend, in a major match, you may spend 5-6 hours on the range and shoot for 2.5 minutes,
mm-hmm.
Maybe less if you're
less if you're good.
Yeah, maybe less if you're good. It's sure. Could we add more people to Carry Optics Nationals? Yeah. Are we going to make the lives of the people that have already signed up and the staff miserable? Yeah, it's not. Is that worth it? And I think we're doing the best we can with the facilities we have, and we're always looking for better ways and bigger facilities, and it's a constant process, and it's a little hard with the role turnover. Each board member turns over after 4 years, president turns over after 4 years. There's a lot of flux in that, and so it's I think I can say that I've been on the board now for 36 days, and I'm still in the I don't know what I don't know phase. I've spent a lot of time reading minutes and learning and trying to educate myself.
The real question
I'm at 6 months, and I'm no further along than you, Scott.
Scott, how much is 36 days? How long has that taken off your life so far, do you suppose?
I have averaged 10 to 12 hours on the phone per week since I've been on the board with members and section coordinators.
Yeah.
I had a long call with the Minnesota section coordinator last night, trying to answer some of his questions, and I'm going to end up, I think, helping a little bit on the back end with some of multi-gun nationals. He's put me in connection with those match directors, and I just I want to help wherever I can. That's I asked the people in Area 3 to vote for me, and now I've got to kind of put my money where my mouth is and show them some action.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, the next agenda item, USPSA presidential duties, accountability, travel, and financial reporting. What's going on with that?
Well, I think what we're really trying to look at, especially with the transition from a president CEO model that we've been living under for the last basically since Foley got elected, and then we transitioned to the what's old is new, the president managing director model that was before Foley under Strader. That's part of relearning the wheel to a certain extent. There's areas that the president says, okay, hey, I think this is part of my job, and it's like, oh well, no, actually this is someone else's job. And so we're going through the process of trying to formalize that, especially with another presidential election coming on this year. It's been I think the best way to describe it, it's a lot of learning by running into brick walls over and over and over again. And so in an effort to ensure that whoever's running for president this year, we're really trying to formalize and codify that in terms of, okay, like this is what the roles and responsibilities are, potentially above and beyond what is spelled out in the bylaws.
All right, makes sense.
Yeah, it's really I think the goal is to provide a starting point for any incoming president, so that they understand, and can have kind of a template of, hey, this is kind of how things work. This is the basics. Is it an end all be all write up of what you're supposed to do? No, but this gives you a starting point, so that back to there's a lot of I don't know what I don't know yet. To try to clear that up.
So am I correct in saying, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And there is definitely a lot of that. I mean, I know for a part-time job, I probably spend, all of that part-time job just dealing with IPSC stuff. So one thing that's very interesting from an IPSC perspective is that IPSC basically doesn't respond to anything unless it comes directly from the regional director. So IPSC major matches are coming up, and probably once a day it's, hey, is this person an IPSC member in good standing? Is this person an IPSC member in good standing? And so it has to go that way, where I'm sitting here looking on the member lookup going, okay, who's this person? Okay, yeah, their membership is still valid. And then sending an email back and saying, hey, these 15 people are, can participate in an IPSC match. I've already sat in 2 general assemblies. And for anybody who thinks that USPSA board meetings run a long time at 5 hours, yeah, IPSC, we like to run a little bit longer because you've got 90 people trying to make decisions about things. It's glorious. It's just like being part of the UN.
Sounds pretty miserable to me. I'm not going to lie to you. So to summarize, kind of the presidential duty, that whole item D, I guess, Delta, it would be basically redetermining or redefining what the position is, what it entails, what you're responsible for. Is that fair?
I don't think it's so much a redefining as more of a clarification. So,
Okay.
I know when the bylaw changes happened, there was a lot of concern about, what was being passed and like, oh, the president now can't do this, so on and so forth. It has been a collaborative learning process, between myself and Donna Webb in terms of, okay, what is it that you're doing? What is it that I'm doing? And working together as we learn kind of where the boundaries are. It's basically codifying that, so that way anybody who would come in afterwards in the next election, regardless if it's myself or it's someone else that's running for president, hopefully there's an actual document that says, okay, this is what you do, this is within your roles, this is what we've learned could be better handled by the permanent staff, and oh, by the way, this is kind of a roadmap for how you need to conduct your business as the president or as a board member. We're not really quite sure where that's going to go yet, but it is basically providing some kind of document. Certainly, when I showed up as president, it was sort of, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? Just ask.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a little challenging at times if you don't know what you don't know.
I get it. Well, I'll talk about myself just briefly. I'm on the. Sorry, go ahead.
And
Well,
that's one thing that I think is sometimes lost is that the president is also a board member too, and so I think as we go through this, we'll provide a lot of definition because we've got some area elections upcoming too, and it'd be nice to have them to have the new incoming electees because I don't believe it sounds like we're going to have quite a few choices in Area 6 and it'd be nice to have let those guys, gals, whoever hit the ground running.
sure. You mentioned
Provide some continuity for the organization. That's the real goal, I think, is to provide some continuity so that we don't get bogged down as we do business in board meetings with having to retell and relearn and reteach.
Sure. You mentioned board members also. Is that a clarification for their positions also? I mean, well, like I'll brief a little tangent. So I became the treasurer of my proper gun club, and the person that did it before did it for a while. They left. Nobody really knew what they did. It's a bunch of good old boys that kind of just do their thing. I mentioned dual control. They don't really know what I'm even talking about. So it's it's like, hey, like what are we doing? Like, let me give you a document of what I think you want me to do. Is this correct? Is there anything that you're expecting me to do that is not on this document? So are you doing that same type of process for the board members also, or looking at kind of the organization as a whole and how it's structured?
Right now, I think we're starting with the president's role, and I think that's you bring up a great point. Maybe that does springboard then into the the board member role also because there's a ton of overlap.
Mm-hmm.
The president is chairman, and then he has the IPSC duties, which Yeeman covered a few things that I had no idea about. I've never traveled internationally, never shot an IPSC match. It's on my list. I might have to get on an airplane. I've never done that either.
Can't believe you've never been on an airplane.
I've never been on an airplane. Yeah.
I can't say you're missing that much, but I mean, it's just strange you haven't done that.
Well, just out of curiosity, Joel, like when you came on as treasurer, I
Mhm.
mean, was that pretty much your experience of, okay, well, the old guy left, and you're asking, hey, what am I supposed to do as treasurer? And it was a little bit of, I mean, was that similar to your process as well, where you basically kind of had to learn as you went along?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that was the parallel. So yeah, learning as we go along, what's been managed well, what hasn't been managed well, nobody knew what the person before me did. Being a good old boy system, I'm not saying USPSA is or isn't, but people just kind of assume that somebody's doing something else. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. A topic comes up, it's like, I thought you took care of that. I thought you took care of that. And there just becomes a communication issue, especially, well, if it's relatable to the org. As our gun club grew, practices, whether it's best practices, accountability, dual control, those kind of processes didn't grow alongside our gun club. So we have a gun club that's doing very well financially, has a lot of members, but it's kind of a group of people that have been on the board for quite a while, not a lot of movement there, and the way of thinking or outside practice or new ideas hasn't necessarily caught up, I think, with the size of the gun club or the growth, is fair to say.
Right. So there's a certain amount of tribal knowledge that exists that isn't codified or written down in policy anywhere, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
No, I think that's a challenge with any organization is, as you start to do your transition planning, one of the things that really helps is, okay, these are all the lessons that we've learned. Let's go ahead and write, have this recorded down so that in case any of us get hit by a bus, that
Yeah.
whoever comes in afterwards can open up this document and go, oh, hey, these are the policies and processes that are in place. So, and the downside is, I'm sure, Scott, you're familiar being in the financial world, and me as a program manager, writing policies and processes is a pretty time consuming process.
Of course. Sure.
It's zero fun.
Then you have 10 different people look at it.
At the same time, it's part of what we have to do to make sure that this org lasts beyond all of us.
I agree. Next item on the agenda is Board of Directors Code of Ethics.
That was another one of my items. I just wanted to, we've got an election coming up, and I just wanted to make sure I understood as a board member what, what, where in the election, who I could talk to, and, do we come out in favor of different candidates, and just have that discussion, because back to, I don't know what I don't know. I don't want to come out and say, vote for Frank or vote for Bob or whoever, and then find out, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and that's inappropriate. So that was something I wanted to talk about and understand, and what contact should I have, or should we have with candidates prior to the election. So as that was, and I think that Yeeman just kind of took the language that I sent to him. That's the goal there. There's nothing, not anything nefarious or anything. I just wanted to make sure that I knew what the rules were so that I can play by them.
Makes sense. You mean anything to add to that?
Sorry, just to key out with that, Scott. I mean, I think that it is a very important thing for us to be able to have that when a new area director or board members is brought on board, that they have that onboarding that explains to them, hey, these are the boundaries by which you're supposed to act by. I was president of my club for 2 years, and then I was a board member for another 2 years after that. Joe, you've been on your board at your local gun club. Scott, you've been a part of your board for quite some time, and so we all have our different experiences coming from our local clubs and boards and leadership. And at the same time, being part of a board is not necessarily a requirement for election to a USPSA area director. You could have somebody that runs and gets the popular vote, and their experience with the board doesn't exist. So there is a certain amount of training that needs to be involved, so that way, instead of running into issues and potentially getting yourself in hot water just because we all try to do the very best we can as human beings, and then realize, oh, now that you're part of a greater organization, what we do individually in sort of being good people and in the best interest of trying to be that friendly face, could potentially put the organization in a position that they don't necessarily want to be. And without a guiding document, that learning tends to be very experiential, and in some ways can be very painful.
Sure. Yeah. If you don't know you're breaking a rule until you already broke it, that would make sense.
Yeah.
What about next item is social media policy? I'm super interested about this.
We have a member that's had a lot of questions on that, and I think we need to bring it up and make sure we're all on the same page on that, and understand understand what are the goals of our social media, who has control of it, who can who approves posts, and what does that all look like. And that's that might be just more of again me trying to understand and see, are we putting forth a unified message, and what does it cost, what do we spend on it, and can we derive any return on investment?
Makes sense.
Does that sound right? Is that
any to add?
I think all of that goes back to what we covered in the agenda. What was covered in the agenda before is, okay, if the board is going to be held responsible for how the organization acts, then it's probably a good idea to have that all documented down, so that whenever someone does ask, hey, what is this policy? There's something that you can actually refer to, instead of I think it's this, or I'm not sure. So again, it's codifying policies and processes, which is, as Scott alluded to, that's something that we're really trying to have these things established, so that it's not tribal knowledge. It's documented. Hey, this is what it is, so that everybody, including the membership, can understand. This is how the organization functions.
That makes sense. Honestly, the social media is something that comes up a lot, just as far as, I mean, that's the problem with, well, I guess a good and bad thing about the internet. Everyone thinks they could do it better. Everyone has access to a smartphone or a computer. So there's always opinions. People love getting argumentative online. I mean, all kinds of crazy things happen. Once your policy is finalized, is that something that will be available for the membership to see? Or is that something that would just be a document only board members see regarding their etiquette? or anything passed along to the membership to show, I don't know, the direction the org is taking with social media? Because I mean, it is a powerful tool, obviously.
Yeah, I think it would be a little bit of both. There would be the public facing, this is our goals, and then I think there should be some guidelines for individual board members. I mean, I take my day-to-day work life. I have anything that I put on my professional stuff like LinkedIn. So a regulator's got or an internal compliance person has to look at it first. My personal stuff is something different. I know I personally, every time I'm about to post something, I think, boy, how could this be taken?
Mm-hmm.
And then there are times where it just gets deleted. Because I'd rather say nothing than to have something said that is taken wrong. I'm cognizant of, every time I speak in the role of Area 3 director. Yes, I was elected by the Area 3 residents, but I served the entire membership, and I have to remember that the trust placed in me by the people that voted for me, and then the organization as a whole. That weighs sometimes.
Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall. I'm not going to lie to you, because I mean, we all see stuff on the internet where there's board members sometimes that post things that I probably would not agree with. I've seen, exchanges, stuff like that, where I'm like, man, I would not be arguing with people online, because put it on me. Anything I post on some level is going to reflect on Ben and Wanchik, because I'm business partners with them and on Training Group, the product as a whole. So if I took to the internet saying, racist remarks, or I hate this person, or boycott this, or a political stance, whatever, like that gets hung on my friends whether they said it or not. So seeing sometimes the actions of the board members, just being straight with you, and like either being argumentative or some of the posts, like that speaks for the org. That gets hung on everyone. Regardless if you type that or not, a fellow board member types that, and I was like, that reflects on everyone. So I just my own 2 cents. I think definitely discussing that as a board would be smart, just for the message it puts out, I guess, to the membership and just appearances.
If it goes on the internet, it never goes away.
No, not at all.
Even if you delete it.
Even if you delete it.
Very true. Good. Well, that was that's the last. What else we got after that? Reports. Anything? I mean, do we want to go line by line? Is there anything in there that you'd want to discuss about?
Well, I think let's hit on limited optics for just a minute. I know as a club president, I'm getting a lot of questions.
Yes.
And I think that the biggest thing I would remind everyone, it's May 1st when it starts. I know we had our first club match this week, and I got 3 or 4 people reach out to me and say, "Hey, a limited optics isn't an option." Yes, it's May 1st. I'm just as excited as everyone else to play with new toys, but we need to have a little lag time. I think everyone in the sport, should sign a thank you card for Ken Nelson and Practice Score. And so I know that was part of, as we were going through the process to implement limited optics, we wanted to make sure we were respectful of his time and all the work that he has done for Practice Score to get ready and roll out this new division.
I like it. I'm looking through the PDF, I guess, on the site, and I'm not seeing a bunch of details about the requirements itself. Is that within the rule book, or can you give me the short version of just what it is? I assume it's 140 millimeters, a red dot, no compensator.
Right.
Single
So
action.
it's
Sorry, go ahead.
it's in the approved appendix. It is literally limited, but with a dot. So your typical limited rules, minor only power factor scoring and with a dot. So the nice thing about it is that with your carry optics rig, you can literally just slap on a magwell, run a race holster, run a slide racker, and go compete directly into limited optics. But unlike the gap between production and limited, like we could always run our production guns in limited, but there's always a disadvantage because of major minor scoring. That isn't present in this current iteration of limited optics. So yeah, it's limited with a dot, minor only.
Or we could just, strive to be nils and just win with the plastic gun.
Is a
Sir,
dot
he is not human.
is a dot required to shoot the division?
Yes, it is. We did learn our lesson from Carry Optics. You must have a dot,
Hey,
a functioning dot.
Got to ask these questions.
Yes, sir.
And one thing that's also posted on the website are the based hit factors. Jake did a lot of work on getting this, and is it was very interesting and educational for me to hear him talk about it. And he had a very well thought out and logical methodology to come up with these. I think the org kind of learned its lessons a little bit with PCC. And so it's pretty cool to see this, and to see that, as we get to the end of the year, to see how close he is. And I think he's going to be. I think Jake and the people that helped him come up with this are going to be right on with these hit factors.
Very cool. Be interested to see if it takes off. I would say I'm quite happy there is a requirement to keep the division around as far as participation goes. Whether that's way too low, too high, I mean, I guess that'll be seen. But I like that there's at least a mechanism that if it's not successful or it doesn't go over well, at least we're not stuck with it. So yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Well, that was something we really were mindful of, especially when the provisional division was first proposed. I know there was some, we definitely saw that in terms of the comments with the survey of, hey, traditionally we have seen that once a provisional division happens, it's pretty much permanent. Mm-hmm. Again, from an organizational perspective, it's about trying to improve our processes. Yes, I get it. It could be a very minimal number, but at least the metric is there. And more importantly, it does tell the membership, hey, we do actually have a metric. We are going to assess this metric. Everybody's been asking about limited optics, but if we look at it a year later and you've got, nobody really wanted to shoot it, then, perhaps the demand really wasn't there. And there's functions built in to basically ensure that we can adjust the rule set if we see, certain things that have changed throughout the year. The ability to, actually collect data and evaluate the division in a quantitative manner. I know there's been some discussion about, okay, well, why add another division? Why do limited optics? The reality is that whenever we have new technology that could potentially impact the sport, the only way that we currently have to evaluate new technology is through a provisional division. So if we go back and take a look at when Carry Optics was first proposed by Phil Strader, the tactical community that we had been talking about slide mounted optics beforehand, and it's really interesting that the same arguments that were being presented to limited optics were very much the same arguments for Carry Optics at the time. Oh, you want to shoot a dot on your slide mounted dot? Yeah, there's a place for it. It's called open. And I'm not sure that any of us could have foreseen when Phil Strader brought in the division that it would effectively become our most popular division. I mean, we're talking 40% of activity participation is just within this slide mounted optics division. Mm-hmm. So to be able to evaluate, okay, well, what if you put it on a limited gun? The only way to evaluate that within the constraints that we have is to make it a provisional division. And if it succeeds, great. If it doesn't, we find out that we really should be taking a fundamental look at how our divisions are even created. That at least gives us some data and the ability to be able to assess and go, okay, are our divisions as currently constructed really the right divisions, or should we have a more philosophical discussion on what division should we actually have available?
I like it. It makes people put their money where their mouth is, because if they want the division, they have to go out and shoot it to get the the activity credits. Well, I interview a lot of people. One of the questions, like the last question I always ask was like, well, if you're a king for a day, USPSA, what'd you like to do? And people go up with all these different, a common thing that people always want to talk about is like, well, I want to remove this division. Limited 10 doesn't need to be here. No one shoots revolver, whatever. Do you ever think about adding any mechanism into existing divisions that don't have a very high participation? Like, for instance, limited 10. And if that doesn't have a required amount of activity within a certain period, it goes away.
I'm going to jump in here and say, things like limited 10 may not have a lot of participation in states where mag bans aren't a thing. And I think we still have a few states that is the thing. And so it kind of it's more regional. Yes. if we look at Area 3 for the last few years, there's probably been less than 20 people that have participated in level 10 or L10 over the last 10 years. I had a competitor stop me Tuesday night at our match last night, and was excited. He says, "Hey, there's 10 people signed up for single stack. I'm going to be number 11, and I've never gone to Area 3 before, but I've always wanted to, and so I don't know." I guess I would turn that around and say, what does it hurt having that division? If no one participates in it, it's not watering down the competition.
Makes sense. And you don't have the money spent on awards if there's not enough people in the division to buy those trophies.
Yeah. I mean, the USPSA has done a good job in the rules with an appendix and says, here's how it is. And we just follow that. If you don't have 10 people, then it's just not recognized. And one of the things that I'll do proactively for the bigger matches, if I see there's only 6, I'll reach out to those folks and say, hey, just so you know, we're following this appendix. Right now, there are only 6 of you. You will not be recognized. You're welcome to shoot the match. I hope you have a great time. We'll do everything we can to make sure you have a great match experience. And part of that is proactively communicating to you and say, hey, we're not going to, there'll be no plaques. There'll be no portion of the prize pool this year for Area 3 for that division.
Makes sense.
Eamon, did you want to?
Well, the challenge with participation, again, there are certain divisions that are sort of fundamentally part of the culture of USPSA. So I get it, revolver and single stack, participation might not be the highest, but at the same time, those are, very unique platforms. So I think the discussion that I've had, before I became president was, well, we know what the outer boundaries are, right? We know open is do whatever you want, major power factor. If we look at single stack and Revo, those are very unique platforms. The question always then becomes, okay, well, what about the squishy middle, right? Production when it was first implemented, what does production look like as it was implemented in 1999 and 2000? Well, what is a production gun in 2023? I don't think if anybody could say, hey, we originally created production so that people could shoot factory guns, and now 23 years later, what is a factory gun is not just, hey, it's got a crappy trigger, crappy iron sights, get out of the box, and I'm happy if I can even shoot well with it. I mean, if you look at the Shadow 2s, you look at the Tanfos, you look at the Canics, you're talking about essentially semi-custom guns that are coming from the factory now, right? I don't think anybody could have imagined that a Turkish company could basically create a striker-fired gun for about $500 to $600, and it is a great pistol. Like you don't have to do anything to it. And if 20 years ago we said, hey, you're going to be able to buy a $500-600 gun that is just absolutely amazing with trigger ergonomics, we probably would have been laughed at. So there is, there's always that question of, okay, well, once you create it, there has to be a very legitimate reason. I think one thing that we've always thought about within USPSA and as well within IPSC is that once you allow something, you have to have a very, very, very good reason to take that back. And generally the answer is that there's not a good reason to take it back. I mean, even if we look at limited 10, something that we brought up in the surveys, well, what if we repurpose limited 10? We understand that it's an artifact of the assault weapons ban and the magazine capacity bans, but there was a proposal that was out there to potentially reconfigure L10 to just say, okay, you could put optics on there. Okay, so what does that do? Now you have the potential to shoot a Revo with an optic. You could put an optic on single stack, which I know Stephen Newell would love because he's been asking you about single stack optics for about 3 years now. And in a way, you could actually make L10 a limited capacity division, and it could potentially be an experimental division as well, right? So you've got a limited capacity division, run optics, no compensator, but now you can kind of experiment with L10. And so now L10 becomes this division that isn't just, okay, well, I'm either going to shoot this because I'm trying to get a trophy or so on and so forth. It provides some new life to that division. And so that's something that was really interesting to look at, especially, being recommended from NRA to say, hey, we are aware of these issues with the divisions. Is there a way that we could repurpose the divisions so that, there's new life that could be infused into them?
Oh, very good points. All
So
right.
Joel, you just came out of Summit. 75 some people. How many people had dots on their gun? What percentage? Half, 3/4?
I don't know. I'd say probably 3/4.
3/4.
There's still a couple hardcore production people around, maybe a couple single stacks, but for the most part, it'll be a handful of guys shooting open division and mostly CO.
Okay. What about, as you travel across and you've done, quite a few classes this year,
yeah.
would you say across the nation it's predominantly been more dots than not?
Yeah, I mean, well, actually, I train pretty much the dot gun now almost exclusively, because if I go to a class of, let's say there's 25 people in it, it's very uncommon to have more than 3 people with iron sights. It'll normally be 1 or 2.
Okay. Yeah. And that's what I'm seeing too, as we, our home range has, 800 some people. And as I interact with those different members, almost universally, they'll have one or two iron sighted guns and then several with some sort of dot. And that's, and I understand it as a new competitor. It's a lot easier to hit the target,
Mm-hmm.
And everyone wants to hit the target.
And there's extra ammo. So if you need makeups on steel, or if you have misses or whatever, that's all in the gun too.
Yeah. So one thing I do want to circle around to a little bit. I know, in the meeting we talked about, we spent a lot of time on the finances. I think we want to make sure that we get the message out there that the org is healthy. We as a group spent a lot of time on the finances because we know it's important, and we know it's at the top of mind of a lot of members, and it's been the product of many social media posts.
Mm-hmm.
The org is healthy. We're trying to put in the work as board members to make sure it stays that way, and that we're here for the next generation. We have to figure out a bit on how to evolve, and how do we continue to recruit that next generation of competitor and volunteer and supporter.
And if it's stuff you can't share or you don't want to, you can tell me to go fly a kite. Is there any difference for the way money's being allocated or invested or looked at or measurement? Is there any change in practices that way that you could share?
I think no, I wouldn't say that the board did anything wrong before. We had last year we had quite a few different nationals, and we had the shift away from Cameo, and there was some other things that made it cost more. And I think the biggest thing we're doing, and I apologize, the clock right above me is going crazy. The biggest thing we're doing is we're making sure that we are good stewards of the org's assets, whether that be financial, volunteer, or just plain member, and that we're, for lack of a better term, we're squeezing every penny to make sure it screams before we spend it. And that control is going up and down and throughout the organization. Obviously there's a budget out there for 2023. And yes, it's very high level. But we worked hard, and yes, the vote for the budget wasn't unanimous, but at the same time, we as board members spoke our opinions, and now it's our job to come together and move the ship forward. And we will work together. The budget passed, and I'm confident that we will get to the end of the year and look back and say, yeah, did we get everything 100% perfect? No. Are we going the right direction, and are we a stronger organization than we were a few months ago? Absolutely. We hit the 38,000 member mark. That's fantastic. The USPSA has the same problem that my home club does. Is we have a little bit of turnover and people that don't renew for whatever reason. And I think one of the focuses this year is going to be to figure out what that is and how do we help re-engage that person. And ultimately, the match experience comes down to the club level. And so how do we figure out how to help that individual club contact, that individual match director run a successful match? I think it's unrealistic to think that USPSA can send someone out to every match to help pound nails. But to have that person to say, here's maybe a little help with practice score. One of the things that I do for my area is, I'm fortunate that my club has a big barn and it's got a forklift and concrete floors, and we can bulk buy targets and then make those available for both the members of my section and other clubs in the section. I don't know if you've noticed, but targets have gone up dramatically. They're almost $1 a piece now.
Yeah.
That's we had a 4-stage match last night where we put out, between 10 and 8 to 15 targets on a bay. That's the costs go up quite a bit. And so just things like that to try to help and best practices and make that tribal knowledge a little less tribal.
That makes sense. Looking at the voting for the budget, it was not unanimous. Even I feel like I'm making Scott talk the whole time. This way he can mute it if his clock goes off again. What can you say about as far as it not being unanimous? I mean, the budget you think is a big part of USPSA, the finances, and not having everyone on the same page, or people voting to not. Can you speak to why everyone wasn't in favor, or concerns, or anything along those lines? Whatever you can share.
Well, I know traditionally what we've seen in the meeting minutes is that there's a little bit of consensus building that takes place. At the end of the day, I'm part of 8 other members. There's 9 of us on a board that can vote on a particular topic at any time, and consensus is appreciated, and where we can, that makes sense. But we also have our different responsibilities, not only to our area or to the national level as a whole. So having disagreements or even recorded disagreements is not necessarily a negative thing. If anything, it allows it there should be the freedom within the board to be able to say, hey, like, I'm not 100% comfortable, or there's still some concerns that I have with the budget that aren't necessarily resolved. And due to that reason, while I believe, while a board member might believe, 85, 90% of the budget is a good thing, the 15% doubt, or whatever number you want to put on there, that's still just enough concern to say, I'm not entirely sure that the budget should be done at this time. You see that in political votes all across the spectrum, where having 100% consensus and everybody saying, yep, we're going to totally go along with this. That's not necessarily the case. So, with the two no votes, the rationale for voting no, it was understandable. There are still concerns. We do have a budget. It was a budget that there was a significant amount of time spent. I know Scott, you, Donna, and Ted, you guys went through this stuff with a fine-tooth comb, trying to see where can we cut away at the fat, where can we be more disciplined in our expenditures, balanced against the potential revenue for this year. It was definitely a very deliberate, very drawn out process, and the budget again is a marker for us. So as we go through the year, with spending policies and board policies that need to develop so that we have that level of fiscal control, and Scott's been a great champion for that. Okay, now we have our line in the sand. Now we need to put in the measures in place to say, okay, now how do we abide by those lines in the sand that we have? And if for some reason we do need to exceed the budget, it needs to be very deliberate, and it needs to be a very mindful process, so that we're not just saying, oh yeah, we have to do this. Like any other organization, there's a certain amount of expenditures that we are required to have. So, salaries, holding nationals, that's always going to be an obligation. Now, where we can kind of minimize those expenditures or be more cost conscious about it, we did go through that process. We do have that in place, and now that we have this out there for the membership to see, then it's incumbent in our role as good financial stewards of the organization to actually stick with that and make sure that we're reviewing this on a monthly basis. So, but even dissent with the vote, hey, we're the organization isn't this giant monolithic, hey, we're all gonna, agree on whatever message is out there. Every area director, they have their own concerns about the direction that the organization is going, and that should be reflected in the votes. So we're not, I'm certainly not looking for consensus. Their disagreement in the direction of the organization is welcomed, because we all want this sport to succeed. And it's not always, we don't necessarily have to always agree on everything that's done. I mean, at the end of the day, you still basically had a majority. That was all that was required to pass the budget. And, the majority vote was taken and passed.
I agree big time about there not always seem to be a consensus. I think that's quite healthy to have, especially different viewpoints where everyone, you don't always have to agree. It's good having a disagreement and different viewpoints, for sure. I think that's a healthy thing.
I think you're right, Joel. You hit the nail on the head. For a board to be functional, each member needs to feel empowered and the ability to vote their conscience and then to vote their, what they feel is best. That's the power of a board is, we have 9 different life experiences. We have 9 different viewpoints. And the 9 of us together will be better than if we had, if we all had the same carbon copy voting experience.
I mean, I don't have, just looking at this budget, obviously this is a big picture. Obviously not every little fine line item, but it looks like at the bottom, your proposed net income is $6,651.
Yep.
So this would basically just be a break even. I mean, more or less saying if we could just not lose money this year, we'd be happy. Am I looking at that correctly?
Yeah. Yes. So the number there, and I just want to touch on something. So as a nonprofit, we have the org has an investment portfolio, and that when we look at the true financials, the performance of that investment portfolio will weigh in on that. So this budget really is we're looking at revenues, and we've kept them mostly flat. In recognition of, if we look at our country as a whole, our economy is under some pressure. We're seeing record inflation. We've got the interest rates that you hear about every day in the media, and you've got an uncertain stock market. And one of my roles as head of the finance chair is to make sure that we're, as a board, safeguarding our financial nest egg, so to speak. We're in the process of talking and interviewing some different financial advisors. The plan with that is, the committee will narrow that down, and the board will make a decision on if we change and who we go with, and then to have reporting. I can say that from a risk perspective, we are doing just fine on that. But that will ultimately affect that bottom line. What we have to do as a board is make sure that our spending is right, and that's where this budget comes in. And is there a lot of room? No, there's not a lot of room. But at the same time, we're not projecting any growth. But we've hit the 38,000 member mark. So there should be, if things continue and continue to spin up. I know locally, I'm actually seeing primers on the shelf. There's still a few places where I saw $130 a thousand the other day. That's pretty painful.
For federals or for like Wolf primers?
No, those were federal gold medal match. But at the same time, I've seen some at 70, 80. I'd love to see us get back to 25 that I paid not that long ago.
Me too. Those days might be gone, I think, from everything I hear.
Yeah. So we wanted to be cautious. The old adage, under promise and over deliver. So do I think the only thing I can absolutely guarantee with the budget is we won't hit it to the penny. But it's given us some guidelines that we can measure against as we go through the year to say, hey, are we on track or not?
It's just tough to see how much stuff adds up. Looking at like total meals is $34,000 for the year. I'm like, holy buckets, that's some pretty nice meals. But I don't know what all goes into that number. So
yeah.
Well, the meals is not just, for what we traditionally travel around to. I mean, that also falls within, potentially nationals expenses. It falls within requirements of the job to, get out there and see the staff. And that's 34,000 across the entire organization.
Sure.
So, I mean, if even just looking at, the cost of food right now, those numbers, $5 doesn't exactly get you a Happy Meal anymore. Now it gives you like half a Happy Meal and half some fries. So
Happy Meal's
there's
like
a little
$20.
bit of, oh my God, I don't know when that happened with Happy Meals being $20. So it is spread across, all the employees, all the staff, and all the different obligations that we're required to attend in order to keep the organization running, and also to build up new business. So there's a certain amount of spending money to make money. And I understand, as a whole, that number looks pretty big. If you talk about 10 people traveling over, again, just notionally speaking, if it was 10 people traveling, once a month, then that it gets pretty fast to hit that number.
Oh, makes sense.
And keep in mind that number's the top end. I think there's in reality, we should come in under that.
Oh, makes sense. Anything else on here you want to discuss? I'm looking. I'm not good at reading these. There was a motion to waive Article 10.2.
Yes.
What's that item?
So 10.2 in the bylaws is the confidentiality clause that basically says that we can't talk about anything in the meeting until the minutes come out.
Okay.
I think that I made that motion because I think there's a bit of a difference opinion on what levels of communication. There's a lot of pressure from the longstanding members to keep things quiet until the minutes come out, and then we have one voice. Well, we have 9 board members, and that's really the power of the board. We're never going to have the same voice. Each one of us is going to remember things differently. In preparation of this meeting, I went through the minutes and read through and made sure I understand what is okay to talk about, what is not. I guess I would love to see us get to a point where rather than having to waive confidentiality for the meeting, we have to go back through and say, okay, well, this is what we can't talk about, and everything else is free game. And promote transparency. This is the only board that I've ever sat on, and I've sat on quite a few different ones, that secrecy is the rule as opposed to transparency is the rule.
Eamon, what are your thoughts?
Part of it is the communication, right? One of the things coming in as president is that I wanted to be able to communicate, at least at a high level, what's going on within the organization. After when we did go through the process of waiving the 10.2 confidentiality in the February board meeting, that freed up myself and I think Scott. We pretty much got on the horn right away and said, "Hey guys, like limited optics is now a thing. It starts May 1st." And we'll provide you more information as it comes available. And so there's a little bit of a cultural change, with the expectations of, hey, I want all the information, and members do want as much information as possible. And it's also educating the members of, hey, we just want to let you know that limited options is going to be a thing, but we're still hashing out the details. And it's a very fine balance. I mean, if you go back to kind of what the expectations and responsibilities are for us as board members for the organization, it's not, I think, as Scott mentioned, we all have different experiences. So, Scott being on a board, me being on a board at my local range, Frank being the president of Staten Island, and several other board members that have been on boards before, that it's a learned experience on, okay, this is generally how you talk about things to inform the membership, but not necessarily going down to a level of detail that can be troublesome. And without that level of experience, or without that policy, or without that understanding, I understand the historical context, right? 10.2 was put in place because, historically we've had issues that have come up in previous boards or previous area directors where somebody wants to push an agenda, and in the best interest of trying to guide the organization, they talk about contractual matters, or they talk about other things, and this is not a specific, not trying to specifically point out anybody. It really comes down to, as an organization, we've gone through the process of growing, and the foundational structure to help run the organization with that increased growth, with the change in how communication has been handled, meetings and all that stuff, that's lagging a little bit behind. And so this part of the process this year is really trying to say, hey, we are actually an organization that is fairly decently sized. Let's start to put our processes and procedures in place to reflect that we are a mature organization, and that this is how we should conduct ourselves as an organization, as board members. And like we talked about previously, writing policies and procedures is very painful and it's very time consuming, but it's necessary so that as we have board members transition in and out, there will be that continuity, so that new board members don't necessarily run into issues that have been occurred under previous board members, but they just didn't know what happened. They didn't know why, and they repeat. Those who aren't mindful of history are doomed to repeat it.
Yep. Well, making good points. I like it. Well, guys, I know we've been chatting quite a bit. Is there anything else on here you wanted to hit on? Looking through it, I don't see anything that really jumps out at me, but I could be missing anything.
I think we've covered it pretty well. Yeah, I think we've covered the minutes pretty well. The thing that I want to stress is the org is on a good path. As weather changes, and we'll start to see more and more activity as clubs spin up for the year. I know I was super excited this week to get back to shooting and get back on the range and see people that I haven't seen in a few months. That's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. I'm working as range master for the Cornhusker and the Great Plains sectional. Next weekend, I'm going to Michigan, shooting that sectional. I'm excited to get up there. It's going to be a new range for me, and I get to just shoot. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Where's the Michigan sectional at this year, Scott?
Oh, I don't know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
He'll figure it out when he gets there.
I'll look it up. I should know. I don't remember. I know I've talked to Alex Mansfield. He's the match director. I'm excited to go up there. I'm going to be.
So you guys will be at Brooklyn. You'll be at the Brooklyn range then, right?
Let's see what it says here. Yeah, it's Chile Custom Gunworks is sponsoring it, and yeah, it's in Brooklyn.
That's a really great range. I know the first time I went out to go work Area 5, it's an amazing range. They have a really great setup. They have a really good way of running things in terms of their setups and whatnot. It'll be really nice. Alex Mansfield, I mean, he's one of those guys that we talk about, gets into sport, really enjoys it, really dives into it feet first, wanting to become an RO and CRO. And he's been a really great addition to Brooklyn. I'm really happy to see him kind of start to take a couple more of the responsibilities there. So Mansfield's a good dude.
Yeah. So I look forward to shooting that. And then Area 3 is progressing. Matt and I had a phone call this week about stages and what we want to do. And so we're going to have some yellow poppers and a whole stage of mini targets. So it's going to be fun. I like a lot of the rule changes that came out to really allow us again to bring some different challenges. Area 3 is going to be a shooting challenge match predominantly with some athleticism needed, but there will not be a return of pool noodles.
I was going to say no merry-go-rounds, hula hoops, pool noodles, jungle gyms, moat and drawbridge, like none of that stuff.
Although I saw a stage on social media not long ago where they had a door that you got to kick open and then walk on, and I might build that. That sounds kind of cool.
Whew. Sounds cool. Be better if I had like a breaching charge on it or something. You like hit that and it blows the door off its hinges.
Wasn't there a 3-gun match at Benning where they popped smoke grenades, three smoke grenades for each competitor as they went through the thing?
That might have. I don't know.
I've seen that. I think when they had Hard as Hell, they had a stage that started up where you actually had a breaching shotgun. You actually had to breach the door, which was hilarious when you missed. Yeah, oh no, I dropped my shotgun. Like, oh no, now how do I breach the door?
Yes.
Yeah, I've had people talk to me about stage guns, and I don't know. That seems like that could be a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
I may or may not have seen that before in a match once where we had a 22 TCM that you were supposed to do a bill draw on, and it was pointed at the X, right? And all you literally had to do is raise the gun and shoot 6. Yeah. I had a buddy of mine literally go, oh, yeah. No, it was even better. Are you ready? Stand by, beat, bang. So it was pointed at the X, and he basically shot the first round just above the X, and we're like, stop.
Yeah.
Yikes. Cool. Well, anyway, thank you both for your time. I know this took quite a while, but I definitely appreciate you being willing to go through the agenda. So, Eamon and Scott, both thank you for your time, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yep. No, absolutely. No, thanks for having us. Thanks for having both Scott and I on, and I'm more than happy to basically spend whatever time you want to be able to talk about what's going on in the business. So,
sure.
If anybody wants to get a hold of me, you can always reach me at my first name last name at uspsa.org. So y2emin.lin. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. So I try to stay a little bit off of social media these days. It's just, it's hard to kind of balance. I fully expected when I started that I was going to have this great social media campaign, and then the duties of the office took over and went, wow, I really don't have time to cover any of the social media stuff.
I get it. Scott, would you prefer, is it just area 3 at uspsa.org, or how do you want people to contact you?
Starting this year, the org has gone to a new cycle or a new email format. So it's my name, Scott.Arnberg, ARN is in Nancy, B is in Bravo, URG at uspsa.org is the best email to get me. And I am on social media occasionally. So if find me on Facebook or Instagram. I have a Twitter, I think, but that's it. And my phone number's out there all over, so I may not pick up, but I'll always call you back.
You're a nice guy, nicer than I am. Cool. Well, anyway, thank you guys both for your time. And training group members, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them below in the comments, and I'll see what I can do to get them answered for you.